Scientists are given to understatement. In their paper describing the double helix structure of DNA, published in Nature in 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick mildly declared, "This structure has novel features which are of considerable biological interest." Sir Alexander Fleming even had less to say about one of the great medical discoveries of the 20th century, penicillin. Fleming, who won the Nobel Prize in 1945 for his work, noted about the nature of research, one sometimes finds what one is not looking for. And on November 30th, 2022, in a tweet that afternoon, @SamA wrote, "Today we launched ChatGPT. Try talking to it here." In a brief thread, Sam Altman, predicted, "Language interfaces are going to be a big deal, I think. Talk to the computer, voice or text, and get what you want for increasingly complex definitions of want." Well, going to be a big deal? Oh yeah, definitely. The large language models that are fundamental to generative AI solutions, including ChatGPT from OpenAI, rely on machine-readable content available on the web as books, scholarly journals, or other curated publications. And much of that is protected by copyright. Already, licensing programs are emerging to allow such uses of copyrighted content. In the meantime, publishers, academics, and researchers are recognizing and responding to the opportunities that AI presents to them. These communities all share concerns that machine-enabled solutions must incorporate essential human rights to equity and security, authorship, and authenticity. My name is Chris Keneally. I'm with Copyright Clearance Center, CCC. I'm very happy to welcome you today to this discussion, and I'm very happy to share this platform with a panel of experts who are going to share their insights on these issues. I want to acknowledge first that a scheduled panelist for this discussion, Avi Stayman, is unable to join us. Avi is the founder and CEO of Academic Language Experts, an author services company. He is also the co-founder of ScienceWriter.ai, the first AI co-pilot that helps researchers develop their writing skills with responsible AI. Avi is based in Jerusalem, and in the days since the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas, he's volunteered to give care and comfort to survivors and their families. And he sent along a short statement, which I'd like to share with you about this work. He had been preparing, he says, for months to come to this meeting and this conference, and he's very disappointed not to be able to join us. But instead of preparing and coming to Frankfurt, Avi says, "I spent the last week and a half housing refugees from southern Israel in Jerusalem. These families left via army escort with nothing but the shirts on their backs and needed everything from clothes and food to psychological support and social welfare services. There's still a tremendous amount of work to do, and he felt it was his obligation and responsibility to support them and to be there with his family." So I appreciate that from Avi, and we're very sorry that he cannot be here today. But as I've mentioned, I have a wonderful panel, and I want to briefly introduce them now. Immediately to my right is Carlos Labazari. Carlo, welcome.
Thank you.
He's an internationally recognized specialist in intellectual property law and policy with 20 years of experience working in Africa, Europe, and the US. He's the author of a short paper, a snapshot of the relationship between AI, copyright, and licensing, which is available today at this event. To Carlo's right is Dr. Namrata Singh. Dr. Namrata, welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Namrata is founder and director at Turikaz Group, a medical communications company working with pharmaceutical, biotech, medical device, and diagnostic firms, as well as academic institutions to support research and publications globally. Dr. Namrata is a pediatrician and a founding member of the AI Working Group at the European Medical Writers Association. And on the far end, to my right, is Dr. Hong Zhu. Dr. Hong Zhu, welcome. Dr. Hong Zhu is Director of Intelligence Services and Head of AI R&D for John Wiley & Sons, and leads the Intelligence Services Group in Wiley Partner Solutions. Dr. Zhu holds a PhD in 3D modeling with artificial intelligence algorithms, and he's a chef and contributor to the Scholarly Kitchen blog published by the Society for Scholarly Publishing. And I think, Dr. Zhu, it's important to start with you and to learn more about the publisher's perspective here and how these tools are going to become part of your workflow. And tell us about the role that AI solutions will play in this intended evolution at Wiley from being a content provider to being a knowledge provider.
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, Wiley is a shift from the content provider to knowledge provider. So we start thinking about when we talk about knowledge, so what mean knowledge? So the people, the consume or digest or absorb the knowledge and understand, apply knowledge. And the knowledge is distributed to the people. So there's clearly 3 key elements: people, knowledge, and how you interact, distributed or understand. So we apply the AI to support in these these 3 key elements. For example, the knowledge. When we talk about knowledge, first we need to create knowledge. How? We need, we apply the AI to automatically extract this key metadata and to present the knowledge in the user for the human-friendly, human-readable or machine-readable. And also we extract the knowledge, the hidden knowledge, the valuable concepts, entities, and relationship between the entities from this unstructured text content. So this is a knowledge creation. And then in order to better to serve the people, we need to understand who they are and what their interests so that we can distribute the relevant articles and the knowledge to them, to human. So we apply the AI to understand, help our publisher or partners to better understand who their audience, what they want, what's their interests, what's their expertise. So we can make sure we can make the more personalized the information distribution to them. And lastly, we also want to how can we help the researchers, users to discover this knowledge, because today is the information overloading is too much to read. So we need to apply the AI to simplify it, to generate the summarization to help. And for example, Wiley have the Wiley partner solution have the research exchange submission. So we automatically extract the metadata to make the submission work. It's much easier. And also we have the Literatum, the largest digital publishing platform for the content, for scholarly content in the world. And then we can make all this knowledge is searchable and readable over the internet. So this is, and also we also validate the knowledge, because this is very important. Integrity is, as a publisher, is the key responsibility to make sure this published the knowledge in the good quality, good standard. So we also apply AI to detect its paper mills, image manipulations, etc.
Right, and it seems to me that in order to understand where publishing will be going using these AI tools, it's important to understand how people are using them. And it sounds to me like it's changing the relationship, two relationships really, the relationship of the researcher to the content, but it's also changing the relationship of the researcher, the authors, to the publisher.
Exactly. So this is a change the whole the research experience with this content, especially in the generative AI. So now, for example, normally we consider there's 4 main roles of the researchers, right? Authors, researchers, and also editor and the reviewers. This is normally the roles. And then all this AI, so actually this is not only the content, but also the AI-powered the solutions to change this roles experience. For example, for author, the AI, generative AI now you can use to polish, and help them to draft the manuscript and polish the writing to increase the writing qualities, etc. Especially useful for whose native language is not English. So this is the most popular generative AI application in the world now. And for the researchers, we can apply the AI to identify the ways how to improve the manuscript, and also for the reviewers, identify the ways to improve the reviewers and the quality, And also and then help the reviewers to quickly see, oh, there's any support or contradicting, the literature in this. And also for editor, we can apply the AI tools, identify, is any the relevant reviewers. You can review this and identify any emerging, the journal opportunities, new opportunities. For researcher, lastly, I believe, the AI will be every researcher in the future will have the personal research assistant to help them, not only the discover information, apply the information and remember this information knowledge, but also this AI, especially the AI agent, it can help them to, the plan and execute and analysis the experiment. So definitely, this will speed up the research outcome.
And as the content grows, I mean, content is going to grow because for a lot of reasons. There are going to be more authors who are enabled to submit to the journals, but also AI content is going to be part of the growth as well. What kind of concerns does that raise for you at Wiley around copyright issues and the copyrighted content? And I associate the copyrighted content with quality content because it's content that's been curated, peer-reviewed, and there's an element of trust that's part of it.
Yes, indeed. So now the current situation is, the AI governance is far behind the AI, the capabilities, which is dangerous. And then it's very it's impact the, the research and also the publishing, because it's very hard, for the people to manage all this, this AI capabilities. And then, so that's why, we need, create the legal framework and to catch up the technologies, to have the responsive. So I do have several concerns about this. So first concern is, everyone knows, is, the copyright infringement. So today is the AI, generative AI use, the generate the content which, the infringe on the copyright without permission. So this is a problem. This already is a lot of the suit cases, over the internet. Even worse, recently the OpenAI and Google, they released, the web crawler to allow the, to automatically grab the information over the internet to train the model, to improve that model. Although, they allow the users, the website publisher, to to disable, to block this, but I think as the AI's capability expand, the things has become much more complicated. So this is one concern. Another concern actually is the AI can generate the content, which it's similar to the original content, but it's not that enough to be considered as the copyright infringement. This is one scenario. Another scenario is, it generates some content which infringes the copyright, but it's hard to detect. So in both cases, for the copyright holders, it's very difficult for them to enforce the right in both cases.
And it's very difficult for the researchers to know the differences, too. If it's difficult for Wiley, it's going to be even harder for them. And so trust in content really is going to become so much more important. And again, I think there's an association with the copyrighted content and the trust that is a part of creating that content.
Exactly. So the trust that come from, especially now, it's because AI can generate the content in seconds, but for humans, they generate the content in hours, in days. So there's a trend in the future. I personally think there's the AI generated content will be majority over the internet. So actually, this is makes the human curate, human generated, and the authoritative content even more valuable. Even more valuable, yeah. But how can we guarantee this? So we need build the trust. The trust does come from what? Come from human review, and then the human need to have the input. So AI cannot can only generate the initial result, and in the research integrity detections in many other ways. but it's still for human to verify the result and then they make informed decision. I think this is the only maximize the maximize the outcome by combining the human expert and also, the AI intelligence.
All right. Well, Dr. Hongzu with Wiley, thank you very much. And I want to turn to Dr. Namrata because you've got an interesting perspective. You're creating content and you're working with many of the research institutions as well as the pharmaceutical companies and others who are going to be submitting content to journals and at Wiley and elsewhere. So as you do all of that work, what's your message for publishers about AI and content creation?
I think what has happened is, as you mentioned, when ChatGPT was launched, and that was the honeymoon phase in the initial part where everybody was that it's going to make life easier for especially content creators. But what I have seen and what I have realized in last say 8 to 10 months, it has put an additional responsibility on the medical writers. It's just not, the reduction of the time which is important here. It is not only the efficiency which we have to focus on, but also the checking, all the legal aspects, the integrity part of it, the copyright, as we mentioned. So it's not a very, as to say, it's not a very a magic bullet kind of solution, but it is something which is there. We cannot ignore it. And the publishers also will have to acknowledge. So I did come across, some instances where people spoke about that if it is a AI-generated content, then should it not be accepted, or how do you differentiate? So I think that is where more focus of the publishers should be. That even if it is a AI-generated content, is there a human being who was behind it and who kind of approved it, reviewed it, checked the authenticity of that content. So the human part is going to be there. In fact, even if the efficiency becomes better, the responsibility is becoming higher here. So, so the balance is, and times to come, and with all these, developments happening and new technologies coming up, it's going to get more tougher going forward. So it's not something which is going to maybe make life very easy for the medical writers, but it's going to be, you have to wade through that ocean of tools which are out there, and how much, and then the additional responsibility on you, because I've read about all these class actions and lawsuits, and the writers may come in the center of all this because they are the ones who created the content. And when you're doing it, when you're writing it, or when you're working with your clients, sometimes you are pushed to do things which you feel that which you should not be doing. So we are not the ones who own the content. So that's an additional responsibility on us to educate the client, to tell the especially the sponsors, the pharmaceutical companies, look, it's not so simple. Even if it's an AI tool, so you are not going to get a paper in say hours out of it. So there is going to be some human interactions behind it, and similarly for the publishers also. And for publishers, I think one more aspect which I find it important to mention here is the reviewing part of it. So sometimes there have been instances where the reviewers have put some references which were not actual. So as we say that, hallucinate, the AI tool hallucinates, and somebody might just go to the AI tool and try to put the content and just try to get some, feedback on that. So that's another area where we have to be very careful. So it's not only the writing or the creation part, but also the person who's reviewing it, the peer reviewers and editors, how much they understand the significance of the integrity here, and whether they are checking the references which they are, whether it is being manually checked, those references. If the AI is telling that this paper does not have this reference, so go back and check that reference whether it's actually there or not. So that's a very important point here.
Yeah, well, I think that gets back to the point, Dr. Namrata, that Dr. Zhu was making about the importance of trusting content here. And the challenge with a lot of the generative AI tools is the lack of transparency,
Yes.
the lack of identifying the sources. And that must be really troubling for writers because they do, as you say, have this
Yes.
real responsibility.
Yes, yes. And a lot of guidelines and recommendations did come up over last couple of months. So we had ICMJE guideline came up which mentioned about the responsibility of authors and an additional responsibility. So even if and the disclaimers and the transparency, if you have used a AI tool, then you mention that in your method section. You mention the name of the tool, you mention the version if it is there, or the whole technology part behind it. So this is where I guess the transparency works, but ultimately the responsibility is on the author. And as we write on behalf of the author, then the responsibility comes back to us.
Right.
So, but guidelines and recommendations do help us just to know that what is right and what is wrong, and what we can do and what we cannot do.
Right. And you've told me that the number of tools, the available tools, is just multiplying incredibly, and there's a real activity around trying to understand. I mean, it's one thing to use them; it's to understand the implications. Talk a little bit more about the compliance issues and how people are working through those challenges, the writers themselves.
So I think what I can tell here is about what we, how we function at our company. So a couple of, we actually take care of some of the points where we don't include any confidential data, confidential names, and the tools are only used for kind of mundane tasks which would have taken more time. And we did try to do some literature search using some AI tools, but we were not very successful. And
Why? What happened with the literature search?
so the literature, what is happening is they have, it's not all the databases which these tools include, they cover.
So they're incomplete.
They're incomplete, and also there are certain databases which they don't have access to maybe, and also they are not the most recent publications. So sometimes some of the tools have a cutoff of say couple of months before, or maybe 3-4 months before. So that's one point. And second is obviously the hallucination part of it. Sometimes we do get a reference which is not there.
We should define hallucination for people, which is
Yeah.
when the
Yeah.
generative AI tool puts words together that don't have any basis in reality.
So one thing what we have seen is, even if you prompt a question or you prompt a query there and there is no information available on that tool, somehow none of the AI tools will say that information is not available. I don't know why, why is this? And they always come up with some answer. And then you really have to check it. So I've never come across a scenario where we asked something, there was not enough literature, and we just got a response that there is no literature on this.
Right.
So I really don't know what's the...
Well, I think what's coming through for me is just, the real responsibility, the sense of principle that is involved here. And I want to pull back a second and let people know about your background. You're a pediatrician.
I'm a pediatrician.
Right. So you have dealt with patients and you've worked with people who are at one of the most important parts of their lives. And many of the writers that you have are women particularly trained in medicine who are trying to balance family and work and so forth. So this is deeply a part of what you do. It's not just the business part. It's your professional concern.
Yeah. So it is. And another concern here is we have people working from various locations, and so the technology part and the security part and somewhere the integration with the IT and technology. So all this is where everybody, whether it's a small company or a large company, I guess that's where everything has to converge. We cannot have it in isolation. We cannot have a tool and just ask the team to implement and start working on it. So we do a small experiment on various tools, but that is only for an experiment sake, where we are not working on the client projects or confidential data on that. We navigate these tools, we see what are the advantages, disadvantages, how much of time it is reducing, or what is the productivity, and we have certain parameters which we evaluate on those. But that's a completely a research activity which we are doing internally. And there are very strict instructions to all the writers, and we have the whole IT kind of infrastructure also, where they're not allowed to work on client projects yet. So the only places where we have worked AI tool as writers, as creators, they have been either summarizing some of the literature, where the list of the literature has been very lengthy, especially for systematic literature reviews or narrative reviews, where we don't have confidential or proprietary data. So we have used tools there. And sometimes it is, maybe to give some creative ideas, or and I always say that, if a writer is having a writer's block, and we're just not able to maybe, just initiate the paper, or we are stuck somewhere. So that's where I really see a use case there, where you can use these tools to give you more ideas, but handing over the complete data to it, and that too in a area where it is publicly available. You really don't know what these tools are going to do, even if it's a paid version.
Right.
So it's not that the paid versions, they are not using that data.
Well, I was a journalist in my previous life, and we always said, consider the source. And it
Yes.
sounds to me like that's equally important in
Yes,
your profession.
yes.
Consider the source.
Yeah, and there's one more very, very important concern which is here. So the tools which are there, they have been trained on manually generated data till now. Now what's going to happen in next couple of years? So maybe more AI generated content is coming, and then the training will be on those AI generated content. And eventually, maybe the quality of the content overall, because everything is connected. We are not working in silos here. We are connected to so many various stakeholders. So eventually, if we don't have these rules and regulations in place, then it might have a very serious impact on the research integrity itself. And then what papers we are getting afterwards, can we trust them? Do we can we quote them as our references? So that might happen.
Well, Dr. Namrata, thank you for raising those important points. And I want to turn finally to Carla Lavazari. Carla, welcome again. And you have contributed to CCC what I'll call a white paper here, a brief paper on the snapshot of the relationship between artificial intelligence, copyright, and licensing. We have copies of this available for everyone here. And I guess I want to ask you a little bit, because we assume a lot here when we hear about AI, and definitions are sometimes crucial to this. What do we mean by this AI or that AI? Which technologies particularly are using copyrighted materials as the inputs for their solutions?
Well, I mean, the models that have been catapulted in everyone's consciousness, and thanks for having me today, are the large language models, the LLM, which is maybe one instance of a so-called foundation model, which is a broad general application AI tool, and typically those are trained on, be it structured or unstructured inputs of enormous proportions, some really fantastical numbers, and are trained to be of general application. They are then sometimes enhanced by what I would call specific libraries to make them more suited to perhaps medical writing or fire regulation of buildings in architecture or whatever. So then you sort of specialize the general foundation model into the area you're interested in.
All right. So what are the rights of copyright holders in relation to all of those inputs and then to the outputs as well?
Yeah, so copyright, I mean, there are two questions, the input side and the output side predominantly. On the output side, I think it resolves along the line of similarity. Are the works similar, or is there a new right that maybe creative people need to protect their style? But there's also freedom of expression that should put a limit to what you can protect. I mean, if you want to emulate a famous writing genre, it would be a pity if this was somehow inhibited by overprotecting this kind of similarity of writing style. On the input side, definitely, in order to make any valuable artificial intelligence tool, you will need entire reproductions of works that are scraped from the open internet, or they are procured through special purchases, I guess, licensing of materials to use. I think in the previous panel we heard that open access titles are frequently used, that Frontiers is doing that with Google. So those are the source materials. They will still need to be processed, normalized in some fashion, because in order for the machines to work well, they do need either at the input side structured data, or then they need a, how shall I say, a calibration phase where whatever they learn from unstructured data is tested against labeled data.
Okay.
Don't know if that answers.
Very helpful. And, you know, at Frankfurt Book Fair, it's a global event, but it's important to remind the audience that copyright is a national issue. Can you briefly tell us about some of the responses in various jurisdictions to these questions that have been raised? And they're very new questions, so not everything is fully cooked at this point, but tell us where we're at.
Absolutely. So it's quite spotty. That's the very short answer. So you have copyright law being territorial, so it applies in whatever country legislates, and there have been a few countries that have made specific rules or are in the process of doing so. In the EU, there are extensive rules on so-called text and data mining, and text and data mining for non-commercial and commercial purposes. Text and data mining isn't identical to AI, but there is a significant overlap, so that many people engaged in AI will at least deploy text and data mining as well. And so there are exceptions and opt-out mechanisms that allow you in some circumstances to use text as input in the non-commercial sphere especially, even though software, for instance, isn't included there, only literary works, let's say, articles, books. On the commercial side, there is an opt-out possibility for materials available on the open internet in the EU. So that's a very specific rule. In the meantime, the EU is busy legislating a so-called AI Act, and is addressing what was said earlier, the transparency requirement, especially for foundation and generative AI models. So the AI Act that is expected to go through, but who knows, in December, would ultimately include an obligation to disclose what copyright-protected works have been used to train these generative models. And I do think it is an important marker to force greater transparency into these models. China has gone, if I may add this, also has gone out of its way to create 15 principles, I think around the 15th of September. 18th of September, this has come into law, okay, another 3 days. And those they are principles, but they are pretty mandatory, and as part of the principle is in fact transparency as to labeling of data, and also what data has, and a respect for intellectual property rights.
Right. I've heard people compare the AI Act that's in the European Parliament right now to a kind of a GDPR for AI, that if it were to come into effect in the EU, it would have an influence globally.
That is predicted in the sense that any significant AI giant or business or in publishing, people really publish for the world, or these AI entities are developed for the world. So to ignore a segment of 400 or 500 million people in Europe is going to be hard. Similarly, 1.3 billion people in China, it's going to be hard to ignore and say, we're just not going to deploy our tools in those jurisdictions. I don't think many companies would consider that an option.
And as we've heard from Dr. Zhu and Dr. Namrata, there's going to be a great demand not only to use the tools, but to have material to keep feeding the tools. And so that is a real challenge. What kinds of licensing would meet that demand? Can you tell us?
Yeah, so I think, as it was said earlier, there's an IBM sort of short video that it says AI is big on productivity and on performance, but it's low on trust. And and transparency. So these licenses can either be from segments of publishing, perhaps, that have large content that they can license, or it could be a collective license where a agency such as CCC is used to deal into situations of linking many to many situations. So you have many writers, many publishers on the one side, you have many pieces of content on the other side used by different AI tools. So that is one mechanism, is collective licensing. I think it was said in a US submission to the Copyright Office, the key of copyright is credit, attribution, consent, and compensation. And these type of licenses are well suited to handle consent, credit, and compensation.
Yeah, there's one more point I'd like to ask you about, and maybe the others can help us with this too. We talk about content all the time. I'm a writer, so I think content means words. But in scholarly publishing, content means images, it means data, it means all of these things. Is that what we're talking about? All of that comes under the umbrella of copyright, of course.
Well, I mean, a large segment thereof is in copyright material, so many images, photos, illustrations in scientific articles are subject to copyright. There will also always be data that's not data, raw data that is not subject. In fact, the EU again has legislated in a Data Governance Act and has specifically excluded sensory data from any protection. So when your fridge says to the supermarket in future, you're out of milk, that type of data is not going to be suddenly engulfed in this discussion about how to relate in copyright content to the AI endeavor.
All right. Well, I appreciate the way that my three panelists have sort of laid out these issues, and I want to give an opportunity to anyone in the audience here to ask us a question. Do we have any questions at all around these issues? All right. Well, I'm sorry.
Maybe I can just add one more point.
Please.
Build on this. So I think the AI should now move from the more analytic AI to the generative AI, from the single modality to the multimodality. So AI and also the this rich the research outcome like images, videos, and the text is is correlated, positive correlated, because the AI can be used to generate this rich the research output, images. AI can be used to generate videos, generate text, and even the virtual reality in the future. But on the other hand, this rich the research outcome can be used to feedback to the AI to build even better model. So this is kind of the loop.
I want to get back to Dr. Singh about one thing. I'm sorry, Dr. Namrata, about the expectations. Maybe a good way to end this discussion is to talk about expectations for the future. And I know you've told me that expectations from your various clients have been very high recently, and reality, we're in one of those graphs for, the sort of, I forget how it goes, but the expectations are going down to the trough of disappointment. Did the expectations go very high and then begin to sort of meet reality for you?
I think if I speak from the client's perspective, they have not been very enthusiastic in adapting to it. And even if we mention that it's a tool that we will be using, or if we say that they're not very acceptable yet. And initially it was somewhere like the discussions around that if you're using a tool, then less time you're spending, and why are you charging so much? So those kind of discussions did happen, and then it was that the tool is not going to do everything, and we have to work around it. But going forward, I guess what is required at this time is, because we cannot shy away from these tools are going to be there and we will be using them. And another term which I have come across is like AI as a model. So probably like we have these SaaS models, or subscription based softwares which we have. So something which is more customized, which is more personalized, and the data which is being fed into these tools is then the relevant data of your organization, or of the type of projects or type of research that you work on. It can be a hospital, it can be a research institute. So kind of, limiting to the inputs into it, because if you limit that, then maybe the wrong answers will become less and they will be more relevant to your research question. So that's, one way of looking at it. But then it beats the purpose of the transparency which, the whole research is trying to build up. So that's an area where I guess there is a lot of work yet to be done.
You're right. And Carlo Lavezzari, then, so last word from you about expectations on the legal side of all this in the next year. When we come back in 2024, is there going to be a lot of change even further from where we've been in the last year?
At the pace that this is moving, I expect so, yes. There are so many lawsuits pending in the US. Partly that is due to the US Congress being unable to make laws, so people go more frequently to courts to basically have courts make laws.
And that's always a very risky proposition.
It's a very risky proposition, yes. Having discussions with patent lawyers and paralegals, I mean, there is a lot of interest, not a high degree of adaptation to the tools, but people are frankly also worried for their jobs. So even though these tools are underperforming the hype perhaps, or the initial expectation, people realize it's not the Oracle of Delphi that just gives a magic answer to everything. But the improvements are such that in a year's time, there will be many more applications that can be used in a very productive way. And so we have to get this right. As earlier was said, we can't sort of wish this away. And I think the ethical rules, even in universities, you see it already, how to cite, how to include all the prompts that you've been using, because any lawyer knows leading questions lead to interesting answers, and maybe the machines too will include a little bit of legal advice to sometimes say, on the advice of my attorney, I decline to answer your query.
Okay. Well, I want to thank our panel, but I'll just give you some advice before we do. I'm sorry. Was there?
Question.
There's a question. I apologize. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. We have microphones. I think there's someone with a microphone.
Hi, my name is Sharon Ree. I wrote a cookbook. Dr. To said that AI can generate content similar to the original, but not enough to infringe copyright, or be hard to detect. What long-term implications do you anticipate for writers from a legal, from an income standpoint?
That is a big question. It's a question that's going to be determined, as Carlo was saying, at least in the U.S., by a number of copyright infringement cases right now. So I think we're going to need to wait for the outcome of those cases to really know. But I would probably add that...
I think the Carlo is an expert.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I mean, this type of what I would call lookup information is obviously ideally suited to be an input, and possibly also using AI to infringe your cookbooks. So I think where AI generates a competing entity as an output, it is basically a glorified summarization machine. So I think there the prospect of lawsuits is actually not far off. So where I think it's a harder case to make, where somebody uses a cookbook and then deploys it in a completely different area, let's say mixing of concrete or something else. You know what I'm saying? So because the structure of your text could be used in a variety of circumstances, not just for cooking. But when it generates another cookbook, I think there will be, the case law will develop quite rapidly.
It's competing,
yes,
and that's important.
Yeah.
Important to copyright.
And I just, with my limited knowledge about the copyright, I think the current copyright is mainly designed for human, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So yeah, so
That's
currently in the future, do we need to rethink about the copyright as for AI? So what's the right for AI? Who owns for the AI generated the content? Who is also the original? Who owns this right? Is it builder of AI developers, or the user of AI models.
Or no one at all.
Or no one,
no
or
one
both.
at all.
Yeah,
which is even more challenging to somebody in a Hollywood studio, right?
If I may add, I mean,
Please.
some of the case law on video games goes into this direction, or in pharmaceutical industry, high research, you have foreground IP and background IP. So you get engine developers that develop engines for video games, but then some other video game company will create a video game, and they will have an agreement in a licensing agreement that says which IP is the engine IP and which IP is belonging to the video game producer, publisher. So all of these things will have to be calibrated to arrive at a virtuous cycle rather than at one that is a downward spiral.
Right. Well, thank you for the question, and I want to thank our panel, but I'll leave with some advice. It's always important to use your own judgment and common sense and to verify information from multiple sources before making any important decisions or taking any actions. It's great advice, and you can take it. It came from ChatGPT, all right? I want to thank our panel, Attorney Carlos Scola-Lavazari, Dr. Namrata Singh, founder and director at Turicos Group, and Dr. Hong Zhu, director of Intelligence Services and head of AI R&D for Wiley. Thank you all very much indeed. My name is Chris Kenneally. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.